Welcome to Hospitality Talks. My name is Sam-Erik, and I'm with my co-host Abid. We are today providing a really informative session, an episode about the U.S. market and also the hotel scene. I'm very excited that we have a great panel here, and it's going to be I think it's going to be a great show, Abid. And so please go ahead and introduce our panel.
Thank you very much, Sam. Welcome, everybody. Welcome to Hospitality Talks. It's great to have you back with us. We continue to discuss what the recovery in U.S. markets look like. The past two panels shed some light on it. We've got some folks that would share some data points and predictive indices today. But without any further ado, I'm going to bring in our first speaker, Rob Blood, who's the founder and president of Lark Hotels. Welcome to Hospitality Talks, Rob.
Hey, Abid, how are you? Hi, Sam.
Hi, Rob.
Great to have you with us, Rob. Thank you for taking the time. Now, in all of the conversations that we've been having, it's pretty apparent that drive-by traffics will see the recovery first. Now, as an owner and operator of a regional branded hotel chain, tell us what recovery looks like for you.
It's a great question. I think something we're all thinking about very carefully. As you know, we operate 28 hotels, mostly in New England. So all of our hotels are within a 4 to 6 hour maximum drive of about 56 million people. They're all in secondary and tertiary markets, resort destinations that have had less impact by COVID than metropolitan areas. So we feel like we're fairly well positioned to recover as quickly as possible during this time. The other thing about us that you know as well is that many of our properties, the bulk of our revenue comes during the summer. So Memorial Day weekend is really the kickoff of our season traditionally. And so we're hopeful that we'll have a relatively smooth recovery now, especially because of the pent-up demand from being in quarantine for 60 to 72 days.
Rob, one of the biggest challenges I think the industry is up against is gaining confidence of the consumer that they will indeed be safe. There is undoubtedly a pent-up demand. People have got this cabin fever, and being that we are social beings, we do want to be out and about. What have you done to stay in touch with your guests and with your staff? How do you think that the industry can gain that confidence?
I think good questions. Let me break it down a little bit. I do think that trust is essential during this time period. I think that people will travel to places that they've been before and that they trust and they have a relationship with first, rather than trying new places. And so for us, it's been very important to stay in touch in an honest and direct way with our guests, with our staff, and with our communities, and to continue building that trust that we've earned over the last 8 years since we've been a hotel brand and operators. We've done regular email communications to our 100,000 past guests or so, and just been very direct about what we've been doing. So we closed on March 18th across our entire portfolio with the support of our owners, our staff, and our guests. We felt like our first priority was to keep people safe, and we still feel like that's true. Our first priority is to provide an environment that is as safe and clean as possible, and that's coupled with the importance of maintaining the care, kindness, and connection that we've always had with our guests. We just have to think about a way to shift that a little bit.
And during this stay-home time, what has been your focus? What has been on your to-do list that you've been working on?
Well, it's changed week by week, right? So the first week we were thinking, how do we properly shut down our hotels and restaurants? How do we keep our team safe? How do we do the right thing? Second week was, how do we stop the cash bleed? How do we apply for PPP loans and EIDL loans? And how do we defer our debt so that we can preserve our cash? The third week was really, how do we think about reopening? How do we think about reimagining what we do so that we can stay at the forefront of our guests' minds? And that's really been looking at sanitary procedures, contactless check-in, texting and concierge applications that will allow us to reimagine hospitality a bit. While we might not be able to come around the front desk and shake your hand when you arrive, we want to be able to connect in an emotional way with our guests and continue to provide experiences beyond the four walls of our hotels. And so we've been really focused on developing community partnerships, enhancing our concierge app, which will allow people to connect with things that they are going to do when they arrive at our hotels. Because to be honest, people don't really come to our hotels just to sleep. They come to connect with our neighborhood. And so we've been deepening our connections there at the same time that we've been really focused on PPE, ordering as much hand sanitizer and sanitary wipes as possible, and getting the plexiglass shields up so when people are checking in, adding technology that will allow us to be in touch and connected to our guests without putting them and our associates at risk.
Hey, and I'll turn it over to Sam in a bit, but Rob, what it's been like to work with the communities where your establishments are. These are iconic destinations, possibly secondary and tertiary markets. How has the community embraced your shutting these places down, but more importantly now all the efforts that you're doing to reopen them?
So secondary and tertiary markets is another way of saying small towns, right? We're in small communities that are tight, that care about each other. We're often one of the main economic drivers in the community. So the response when we shut down before we were required to was great. The need to keep our communities safe is paramount. And we have to remember the folks that are selectmen and council folks that work in these government boards are just people. They may be retired folks, and so they're doing the best they can to look after their communities. So we've been supportive of that. As we move towards reopening, we're in close conversations with the government associations in our communities to make sure that we're aligned with them. We're following guidelines. We are working towards reopening, and for the most part, our communities are supportive of that. But fairly, folks in like Kennebunkport, Maine are concerned that people from Manhattan are going to be coming up. So we've done a couple things. Some of our smaller properties we've moved to whole house rentals, where you can rent 9 rooms with a personal concierge and a private chef and quarantine for 14 days when you arrive. So all in all, the cities, towns, and villages that we're part of have been super cooperative, appreciative, and have viewed our reopening and closure as a partnership between business, government, and community.
I think it'll be interesting to see what states do, and then obviously what these communities do, because I know at one point, even going from New York to Connecticut or to Rhode Island, there were almost checkpoints and then you had to quarantine yourself. I hope all that will be behind us before too long, but there are going to be some trepidations, not only on part of the travelers, but also the places that we visit. So I'm glad that the communities that you are operating in there, they are ready to welcome the guests back in. Sam, over to you, please.
Yeah, thank you. Rob, I have a question. What is your sort of a return guest ratio? How many of the guests are not coming for the first time to your properties?
We have a very high guest repeat rate. I'm glad you brought this up. I would say we're in the 34 to 35% repeat business, and that's not just to one hotel, that's across the portfolio. And we surveyed our past guests recently. We sent out a survey to about 100,000 people. And Cindy can probably speak to whether this is a good control group or not, but we had about 4,900 people reply, and we asked 3 simple questions. One of them is, if social distancing measures are relaxed this summer, how likely are you to travel to a Lark hotel? 38% of the people who responded said likely, 26% said somewhat likely. So we felt like that was a very good indicator for us. And those are all people who have stayed at Lark Hotels before. We also asked them questions about how likely they are to dine out, inside or outside, but we felt good about that.
Excellent. Yeah, and I think that sort of those returning guests are really sort of that thing so important. How do you personalize that experience for those people who are perhaps coming out for the first time and you wish them to become your repeat guests?
Well, it's a good question. Let's just talk about it in this moment, because there are a lot of things we did before that we can't do now.
Yeah.
We very much pride ourselves on, and this is a buzzword that maybe we should get shocked for saying, we pride ourselves on authentic service and real hospitality where we meet people eye to eye. We're not ladies and gentlemen serving ladies and gentlemen. We are people meeting people face to face. And so our form of hospitality has been very unpretentious. My collar is never starched. No commentary on starch collars, but we're very casual. And so in this new environment, Sam, we're thinking about how we can stay connected to those guests and create experiences and emotional connection without a handshake, without being able to see a smile, through the warmth of eyes. And honestly, we're doing a lot with video. As we look to check people in, we'll be doing video calls. We'll be sending out video tours and welcomes of properties. We're introducing 24-hour texting at all of our hotels. A fundamental brand standard of Lark Hotels is we want people to be able to experience our properties and our communities on their own terms. And so we started out years ago with iPads in the rooms fully loaded with itineraries. So if they didn't want to interact with us, they wouldn't have to. And so we've set ourselves ahead in a bit because of that. We just have to figure out how to continue to provide warmth and care for our guests in a time period where we can't touch them, shake their hands, hug them, or be within 6 feet of them. And we're working on that.
Yeah, I mean, that really is a challenge. I mean, I've been in the industry all my working life, and I'd never experienced anything like what you're going through at the moment. So, but I just hospitality, or when you provide service, something you provide somebody, and it's hospitality. That's how you make somebody feel. And now making how you make somebody feel in this now, so to speak, the new environment is obviously something which requires a lot of discussion between the team and the associates. That what are the body language and how are you gonna look at the guest. We had in the last episode, one of our panelists said that I don't expect people to use my name 3 times. And these cliches from checklist, but if I like to go to a hotel and I'm blindfolded, I just want to feel how the place is. But can you describe a little bit how does it feel for me if I go blindfolded to your hotel?
I was going to say that sounds like my friend Bashar.
Yeah.
And then he talked about kindness as the new form, right? Which we're very much aligned in that space. We, instead of using the idea of kindness, we always talk about care and making sure that our guests know in every touch point that we care about their experience. And so I think care and warmth are intangible things, and they can be communicated in many different ways. We can communicate them through making sure all of the details of an itinerary are in place, that all the touch points in a room are perfect. But ultimately, it's really about how we interact with our guests, our team members, and our communities that show care. And if you close your eyes, you can almost smell it. It's palpable. The key here is it really comes down to people. We can talk about technology and sanitation and all this other stuff that's so important now. But the beauty of having a small collection of hotels, 700 rooms across 28 buildings, is that I know and we know every single person that works with us, and we're very careful about choosing them, and how they care for people is palpable. And that will just change a bit in how it's manifested, but the spirit of it will not. No. So I don't know that I answered your question directly, but
no, I think I just want to get your perception, because there's no right or wrong answer. It's just like how you see it, which is excellent. If you don't mind, we have somebody from in Facebook who had a question for you. Do you mind if I just give a question right
Sure.
now? I'll put it on the screen so people can see it also. Is Lark Hotels looking at different segments of guests? Is there a focus on more risk-taking guest groups, such as couples, instead of risk-averse families, and potential focus on a new and upcoming segment using digital nomads?
Here's what we think. We think that ingrained in the American spirit is the idea of the freedom of the road and hitting the open road. And I think that our hotels are geographically linked. And so we're looking at how we can do multi-point itineraries for these road warriors, these adventurers, for people who don't want to get on a plane. And so, yeah, digital nomads, you can come work from any of our hotels, get a change of scene. I think that more than anything, though, we're focused on people who want to get back on the road and travel regionally. Even at our property in Marco Island, Florida, we're trying to make connections up and down the west coast of Florida so people can do a point-to-point itinerary and get out there. So I wouldn't say we're focused on a new segment of guests. I think our psychographic has always been a wildly independent traveler that likes unique local experiences. And we're just going to try to link them up into itineraries for people, because I really believe, I know I'm personally waiting to get out there and have new experiences. And if I can tie into a local host that tells me where I can order the best burger to go and then stop at the next best place to get a to-go cocktail so I can go back to my room or sit by the pool at my hotel, I'm going to do it.
Yeah, sure.
Good question.
Yeah, and then my last question is, international travel to what we call domestic travel, is it more US-based guests that you have, or do you have also international travel, and what portion is representing the international travel if you have it?
It's a small portion. So New England in the fall is a great international destination, and so we skew towards European in the fall, but most of the rest of the year, 66% are from the Northeast in our collection.
Okay.
Certain of our hotels, if you break it down, like our hotel in Provincetown, AWOL, we probably have 10% international, but that's our highest amount.
Yeah, very good. Well, I've been talking to my wife that the autumn it's on my bucket list, so you might see us one of these days over there in the autumn.
That sounds great.
Yeah, over to you, Abid.
Thanks, Sam. Rob, a couple of last few questions, and then we'll bring our next guest on. Tell us, being a small regional chain, do you see any challenges vis-a-vis the legacy brands, big brands? Everybody has launched these cleanliness routines that everybody is talking about. Do you think you'll have an easier time gaining the confidence, or how would you overcome that?
Well, here's the thing. We can't partner with the Mayo Clinic to develop our cleanliness standards. We just don't have those connections or the resources. But what we can do is learn from what they're doing. And I think that studying what Hilton and Hyatt and Marriott are doing is smart. They're making good moves. They're leading the industry in cleaning protocol. And so we've developed our own protocol. And I think that what they have and what we have is an element of trust from our past guests. So, if you stay at a Marriott hotel, you're going to get institutional cleaning. But what it really comes down to, Abid, is the people on the ground. And like I said before, we know every single person who works in one of our properties. We don't have any franchise. We manage all of them. And so we know for a fact that if we train people, it will be implemented. And so I think that our advantage is we're small, we're nimble. We can make changes and adapt quickly and roll it out over our 700 rooms in the course of a day or two. If Marriott comes up with a new protocol 2 weeks in, it will take a while for it to feather out to the 3,000 or more, however many properties they have. So I think, like I said before, I think it's about trust. I think we have a good deal of that. As a result of our communications, we had a really great moment where a guest who was going to be staying at Field Guide reached out to our manager and said, I want to let you know that you're the only hotel collection that we'll be traveling to this summer because of how you've handled yourselves during COVID. And I think, and I hope that is a shared sentiment. So yeah, brands, big brands, institutional quality folks, they've got more resources, but I think we have a tighter organization.
Well, thank you for that. As a matter of fact, when this question was asked to our panelists in the past, a few of them had said that industry needs to really stop talking about cleaning the rooms as if we've never done it before.
Right.
So the comment was made that it almost sounds like we were checking people into dirty rooms, and this is an epiphany that we started to clean the rooms. But be that as it may, have you gotten some help from CARES Act or PPP or any of that, and what has that experience been like?
I'm going to try to keep this quick because I'm cognizant of our time, but it's been rocky. So we were able to secure PPP loans for all of our properties and Lark Hotels on April 15th, which means that we have until June 15th to make full use of those funds, or we have to be saddled with 2 years of debt or pay it back. So because we furloughed 150 people from our hotels and we couldn't bring them back because we couldn't open, we haven't been able to make use of those funds in a meaningful way. Our hope is that they will be modified and that we can stretch them out over the course of the season, or we're going to have a difficult decision to make. We have applied for EIDL loans and we've probably been approved for about half of our properties. And mysteriously, some of them have been declined and some of them have been approved, but I'm the same guy applying for all of them. So it's just a mystery sometimes why it works or it doesn't. I think the government has made a great effort, and I'm a little bit worried right now that we're going to get a little bit more partisan with this third stimulus package, and the changes that need to be made might be too late. So it's critical for us that the PPP loans are able to be stretched out, or else we're just going to be in a poor cash position again. And I would like to see some more creative relief. We're starting to look at Main Street loans and stuff like that, but it's been helpful, but it's also been challenging, is the short answer.
Well, thank you for that. I think industry definitely needs to have a cohesive voice and possibly be able to get in front of the lawmakers so that we can get some relief. Not that any industry has been immune to this pandemic, but travel and tourism and hospitality has been terribly badly hurt. So thanks for that insight, Rob. Please stick around. There are lots of other questions and we'll come back to you. I'm going to bring in our next guest, Cindy Estis Green, who is co-founder and CEO of Kalibri Labs. Welcome to Hospitality Talk, Cindy.
Thank you very much. Thanks for having me.
Well, thanks for being with us. Cindy, you have an enormous amount of data from 35,000 hotels across the U.S., and you're almost the person that has the crystal ball that can tell us what the recovery is going to look like. So let me go backwards a little bit. Did you see any indicators of the decline, or was it just when the governmental shutdown occurred?
We knew that, everybody knew that 2020 wasn't expected to be a strong year. So everyone expected it to be relatively flat to 2019. So we knew that we were entering a potentially slower, downturn, but certainly a slower economic period. So that wasn't a surprise. What the surprise was the cliff we all fell off, on March 15th or, March 20th or whenever it started happening for different parts of the country. So I think there was an indication that we were in a softer period and there wasn't going to be much growth. But that's very different than going, we were at 66% occupancy in 2019, to go to 15%. I don't think anyone could have predicted or expected that.
Unfortunately, this falling off the cliff is a very good description as to what the industry has gone through. Cindy, has the industry hit the rock bottom at this particular point? And are you seeing a bounce back or is it still declining?
So we have leading indicators that we track. It's on our website. Anyone can pull it up, kalibrilabs.com, industry-health. So we're looking at overall occupancy and average rate. for the whole industry. And then we're also looking by rate category. So we've seen some interesting patterns. We also track how many hotels are closed. We track airline bookings. We track group pickup and cancellations. And we're tracking search traffic on a number of travel sites. So we have a few different variables, and then our data gets updated every week. So we're kind of looking at what's happening, in a big picture way, and we're tracking by market. So we have almost 1,000 markets that we're tracking. What we've seen is there is an uptick the last couple of weeks. We've seen an uptick. And it's interesting to see how that uptick has played out. It's not across the board. The only increase in occupancy that we've seen have been in 3 segments: rack, bar, OTA, and loyalty member rate. The only uptick that we've seen in average rate is in loyalty member rate and OTA. So what we anticipate is there's a very different picture emerging than what we've seen in the downturn of 9/11 or the 09 recession. And back in those days when leisure transient was the first one to come back, the OTAs were much more nimble, much smaller. In 9/11 they had 1 or 2% of the market. By 09 recession they had 6 or 7% of the market. Now they're at 15 to 16% of the market. So the position that they're taking this time around, we think is going to be very different. They're not so nimble. They've all been struggling, as everybody has. They were struggling before this because of the high cost of customer acquisition and their high cost of Google. But the bigger change that we've seen is that the loyalty member rate programs have been established and running for almost 4 years. So they're quite established. And it's encouraging to see the uptick in loyalty member rate, because what it looks like is more of the business will be coming direct to the hotels than going through third parties. And I don't know if the uptick in the last couple of weeks is in connection with COVID-related, medical teams or healthcare workers or something relative to that. It's hard to know if it's kind of real business yet, sustainable going forward business, or if it's just something still in connection with COVID. But we have seen occupancy take a very marginal but small increase from in the last couple of weeks. We'll see how that plays out. As Rob mentioned, the holiday weekend is expected to be strong, and with everything being lifted in so many states across the country, we're expecting that the holiday weekend should be strong because so many people just really want to get out, and that could be a good kickoff to an upward trend. But we don't know if it's just going to be a flash in the pan and then things quiet down again, because there's so much business in the U.S. that's driven by corporate and group, and that is not likely to come back for a little while.
So you were talking about the OTAs. There was an article earlier this week where Expedia, for the first time, has shown a massive decline in their volume. Do you think that is pretty much consistent across all the OTAs, or is Expedia going through a particular challenge?
No, I think they're all suffering. And I also think that there was an article also about Expedia swearing that they would get off the Google path because it was so expensive. But everything costs money to get customers. So if they're off Google, they're going to pay for TV advertising, or they're going to pay to enhance their app. I mean, it's going to cost money no matter what they do. So I think Expedia has been struggling, and Booking.com has been struggling. They've never had the strength in the U.S. market that they do in Asia and in Europe, and certainly Europe is their home base. So it's hard to tell where they're going to go, but I think that they've become large and kind of bureaucratic and not nimble. And I think that nimble is what will do better. And I think it'll be interesting to see if the brands really leverage this. This will help the independents as well, this Book Direct move. It's going to help everybody. So I think if it really becomes a thing that consumers are a little more comfortable booking directly, I think that the OTAs are going to struggle a lot. And the other thing that came out was that Google announced that they're going to start accepting business through commission. which sounds a lot like what the OTAs were doing to me, strangely.
I'll turn it over to Sam in a bit. Google has been talking about this for the longest time, but at least their hesitation was, do they make more money through OTA ads, or are they going to make more money through transaction volume? But I think it's a matter of time that they will be in it in a big way. Now, you have collected data for the longest time, and you were the first one out with taking into account the acquisition costs and the net revenue. Can you talk a little bit about that, and how has that evolved over a period of time?
Yes. So we started collecting our data 8 years ago. It took us 5 years to build the database. So we've really only been in the market for the last couple of years, because it took a couple of years just to build the tools on top of that. So we're new in the market. However, we've been working with the data for quite a long time. The ability to look at cost of acquisition is going to be, it was critical. It's always been critical, but since the digital marketplace has become so dominant, and you have Google and Expedia and Booking.com and all of these channel and transaction fees, hotels in the US have been spending 15 to 25% of what the guests pay to acquire their customers. That's a lot of money. So in this moment in time where we've got, hotels, again, we heard from Rob, struggling to preserve their cash and do everything they can to be as efficient as they can, acquiring customers is number one on the agenda. I mean, after labor, it's the next thing you have to think about is how can we get our customers efficiently? So I think tracking net RevPAR and net revenue and net average rates, looking at it, taking cost of sales out before deciding what to go after and where to put your funds is going to be major, a shift in the way people had been thinking, because it was just easy and everyone was fat and happy, and however they got their business, they were happy to. It just can't continue, because no one can afford to go after every kind of business. You have to be surgical in the way you target. And that includes deciding how you can spend as little money as possible and get guests and get them to come back again. And I think that's going to be, if it wasn't critical for the last 5 years when the cost of acquisition started rising, it's going to be, in the early days, cost of acquisition was 5% when I started in the industry. The last 10 years, it's gone to, in many hotels, they're paying 25 and 30%. On average, 15 to 25. So it's a metric that has to be watched, and it will have to be watched even more closely as everyone is trying to dig out of this crisis we've gone through and just really think hard about how they spend their money and where they go to find customers and which customers are the best fit for their hotel.
Well, Cindy, there is one of our viewers, Giant, has said that he would disagree that Google would ever get into transaction type model because there are too many stakeholders, too much to manage. But this debate has been had for quite a while. It still remains to be seen as to the likes of Airbnb and Amazon and Google really get into transaction-based model. Sam, over to you, please.
Thank you. Could you address, because now I'm getting the sense that how important it is for hotels to find a way how to reach their customers directly with all the data they can get. But can you go maybe expand on something about the buying behavior? What kind of buying behavior do you see in the market? Do you track this kind of information?
Yeah, we actually just did a survey about 6 months ago. Of course, the world has changed, so I don't know how this may change going forward. But we were interested in how people went about making their hotel selection decisions and the process they went through. Everyone is using some online channel, whether it's for information gathering or for booking. And what we've seen for years is this migration from what used to be considered property direct, where people would walk in, drive in, call, to everything going online. So we used to be at one point in the industry, close to 70% of the business was property direct. We're now down to under 30%. And all of that business that used to be is now split between third-party OTA and brand.com, or booking through a hotel's website or a brand's website. So there's been a big move, and the survey data that we have, which was only 6 months ago, corroborates that. There was definitely a big move toward using online channels to support the whole process, whether it's the early stages of gathering information or actually making the booking. And there's definitely starting to tilt toward a preference to book direct as the apps become more interesting and provide more services, and the loyalty programs do more than give you points. You know, if you can get mobile check-in and choose your own room and, you know, the mobile key kind of function, then, and you only get that when you book on your app, then a lot more people want to book on their app because they want to do those things. And that means you start by making your booking that way. So there's a lot of bias for doing those bookings and booking directly and getting some benefits that they only get from booking directly. So there's definitely been a shift in that direction.
Yeah, I think also that the hotels have to learn also how to look at how the big boys are doing it. Booking is only about 2 or 3 clicks away, and the hotels sometimes make it a little bit too difficult for the customer to make that decision. So I think there's also a learning curve for some hotels, not the big companies, but smaller ones.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, thank you. That's all I had. Abid, over to you.
So, Cindy, are there any trends or are there any patterns? It might be way too early to talk about it at this point, but do you think branded hotels would bounce back earlier than independents? Is it going to be select service that has a better chance versus upper upscale? Any thoughts on that? Any data that you might have collected?
Yeah, so we've created recovery curves, you know, kind of shorter term, kind of 18-month, 36-month, and 48-month recovery curves. So we've looked at what CBRE has done, and then we kind of built on based on the data that we have and established an 18, 36, and 48-month picture. It's going to be very uneven. There are markets that will bounce back in 12 to 18 months, and there's markets that are going to take 4 to 5 years to bounce back. And a lot of this is driven by the nature of the demand in that market. So those markets that are highly dependent on larger groups and national corporate accounts will be much slower to come back because there's going to be all kinds of restrictions on group business and meetings, which will obviously slow that just by government restriction. And then corporate accounts are going to be driven by their companies saying we don't want our employees out, or they're worried about liability issues of having their employees get sick when they're on the road. Or just people not wanting to travel that much, because they're concerned, you know, the health and safety factor, which is very different than previous recessions. So what we envision is the markets that are more dependent on local and regional corporate business and transient leisure kind of business will be the first ones to bounce back. And we're actually going through our 972 markets, and we're splitting them to start looking at how they will bounce back, and based on the nature of their demand, what's the likelihood that they will bounce back more quickly? Because, you know, if a region opens up and there's the normal sales activity and lawyers and, you know, local kind of commerce, there's nothing stopping them from traveling, and those hotels will do fine. Even some group business that doesn't require meeting in one space, you know, using meeting space, but like soccer tournaments and those kind of things will probably start coming back as kind of business. So for those hotels and those markets that have more of that local corporate activity, smaller groups or groups that don't actually meet, necessarily use a lot of meeting space, and then the transient leisure, they could come back in 12 to 18 months. The extended stay market is one that we've seen and it's been written about. We just released a special report yesterday outlining the nature of the extended stay market and why it has been so strong. So, you know, while everybody else had, you know, 50 and 60% drops in their revenue, you know, they were, from a RevPAR point of view, 15 to 20% better. And the lower overall, but the lower tier of the extended stay has recovered even faster, has done even better, and will recover most likely a little bit faster. So I think it's very uneven, and a lot depends on the nature of demand. We track by rate category, which is not available in other sources of data. So it's really important for every market to understand exactly what type of business is coming into that market, so they could decide if that's more likely to come in sooner and grow and cause the recovery. But I'm very positive about the hotel industry coming back. It's just a matter of time and which markets will come back when. We aren't going to be virtual like retail. The stores are going bankrupt and newspapers have gone all virtual. And, there's a lot of industries, financial services can all be done virtually. Hotel stays are hotel stays. So we may end up with some version of virtual travel in our future, but people want to get out and they want to stay places and visit places. And our industry will come back. It may take 5 years for the overall U.S. industry to come back, but there will be markets that bounce back in the next 12 to 18 months. But everybody will be back eventually because people want to travel, and essentially it provides an experience that really can't be done virtually.
It'll be interesting to see, particularly the hotels that are reliant on corporate accounts. I'm sure you have seen a lot of the companies have talked about not ever bringing their staff back onto the campuses. Now, whether that lasts forever or is it temporary, but the likes of Facebook and Google and all these guys have said that people can work from wherever they please. They do not have to come back to the office. I'm sure that's going to have a lot of other ripple effect. Some of the smaller meeting, would anybody get on a plane to go for an hour's meeting only to come back the same day? I'm not sure if those behaviors would change in post-pandemic era. Do you have any thoughts on that? CBRE, I believe it was CBRE's report had projected that occupancy levels would go back towards the tail end of 22 or beginning of 23, but the rate will still lag. So if you put inflation adjustment on top of that, it could be a pretty interesting picture, particularly right now. We are printing money to bail everybody out. Any thoughts on that?
I think that people will go back to offices. I think because, if we have a vaccine, we're going to have amnesia and forget about all of this pretty quickly, honestly. But if there isn't a vaccine and we still have to deal with this, I think that people still have a desire to be with other people. And even if they work from home and have more flexible policies, there still will be office activity and people will still very much want to have meetings. I don't believe we're going to be back to the same 2019 occupancy at the end of 22. I think across the U.S., we're looking at a 36 to 48 month period, but that doesn't mean there's going to be big variation. And I think that there's going to be some markets that are just fine, and hotels in the lower end of the chain scale are going to be just fine pretty quickly. I just think that the wild card, which nobody has any idea, is when can we start having meetings where we have more than 30 or 50 people? No one knows that. And that's, will affect a big part of the market, the higher end of the market. And as far as corporate accounts, I think we're going to figure it out over the next 6 to 12 months. But yes, there will be a slowdown. And I think what will happen is some of those higher end hotels will compete with the mid-scale and the lower end hotels just to fill their rooms. So if people will pay the same rate they might have paid at a mid-scale hotel, but they can stay at an upper upscale hotel, I think that may cause a short-term problem. But I don't see, I'm not pessimistic. I just think I'm realistic in thinking that it's going to take 3 years across the board just because of the nature of the problem. And, if the vaccine comes in 18 months, and then it could happen more quickly, because I think the need and the desire and the fundamentals for travel haven't gone away. And the need for businesses to operate haven't gone away at all. We just have this short-term hurdle. But I think it's going to put us at, minimum 36-month period before we get close to our 2019 levels, and probably closer to 48 months.
Well, certainly some of the models that you deploy in projecting what the future looks like, they are awesome models. And we will put your website in our comments so people can have access to that. Cindy, before I bring our next guest up, just a question. By any chance, do you have any data from Spanish flu time? And if you don't, Tim had promised that he will.
Yeah, I can't say that our data goes back to 1918, but maybe Tim can help us there.
Well, thank you for that insight. Let me bring our next guest up. Timothy Wiersma. He's President and CEO of Revenue Generation. Welcome to Hospitality Talks, Tim.
Thank you, Abid and Sam. And no, I'm not old enough to be able to speak to the Spanish flu, but I know they had difficult times as well. I can tell you that much. That's about as deep as I can go there.
You know, the only anecdotal thing that I had heard about Spanish flu time in a couple of the markets, it was Philadelphia that opened up sooner, and they had all the parades, unfortunately, only to go back and went through a tougher time. But that's purely anecdotal. I don't think they had Excel and business intelligence tools that, Tim, you put to work and the business puts to work. But you've done a lot of work deploying all these analytic tools. Tell us, are there any similarities from the past downturns versus what we're going through today?
Well, the short answer is there are some, but obviously this is very unprecedented. Every hotel in the world is affected by this. Airlines are currently at, a stat I read just yesterday showed that 55% of all aircraft are offline right now. You just have to go down the road to Greensboro, North Carolina. There's 80 airline aircraft sitting on the taxiways parked for who knows how long. So we didn't see that in any other downturn. We obviously saw a downturn in business travel. We saw a downturn in group travel in the last downturn. Leisure remained relatively strong during that time period. But this has affected every segment. Obviously, this is a forced downturn. The government's regulated that, and there's a lot of uncertainty as to when the recovery is going to happen. I mean, all we need to do is look at the STAR results for the month of April. RevPAR was down 80% in the month of April. Since they started recording, they've never seen a drop like that ever. We are seeing small signs, and we look every week. This week, the industry is at 32%, which is the fifth week in a row of consecutive demand growth, if you want to call it that. Little by little, we're starting to see that come back. Yeah, I mean, we haven't experienced anything like this. I think a lot of people are having a lot of conversations, really trying to figure it out together as an industry, how we move forward.
Well, you are correct that this is an induced downturn with the unknown is this bug, and when do we get it under control? Did you see any trends coming into it? Cindy talked about that, yes, we were projecting a flat RevPAR or slowdown to begin with, and then we all fell off the cliff. Were there other indicators that talked about a slowdown prior to the government shutdown?
Well, I mean, back in January, when there was a lot of talk about COVID, and you look at the origins, and you kind of look at the China market, you could look at the European markets because they were leading before the U.S. market came in, so you could kind of see where it was moving. I think everybody was hoping for the best, but sort of realized that this was going to be a tough time, probably in early March. For me personally, I was going to go to Germany in early March, and it wasn't until 2 days beforehand that the government of Germany actually canceled a conference there and forced everybody to cancel their reservations. So it was very last minute, and it came on us very quickly.
Fair enough. Well, Tim, in many ways, you're still better off. There was a story going around on social media for a couple who went to Italy to buy a house. And once they got there, transacted, unfortunately, everything froze. And they're stuck there in this house that needs a lot of work. So you're still better off. You were at least in the home turf. Tell us a bit about what should the operators be focused on as we plan the recovery?
You know, every market is obviously different. You know, you really need to understand the markets that will recover first right now and focus in on that. You know, from a marketing standpoint, if I've got a hotel in Raleigh here, I'm going to be talking to my CVB, be very close to the data that comes out of the airports, understanding which markets are still flying, which ones are not. But you know, really keeping your head to the ground locally as to what is happening. You're in North Carolina. It's, you know, there's a lot of people that are planning vacations within a 2 to 5 hour drive range. So markets like Asheville are starting to see some good pickup over the summer months already, because there's a lot of people that, you know, with pent up demand that want to go somewhere, but they don't want to go too far away, and they certainly don't want to hop on an airplane right now. Outside of that, making sure that you're making it as easy as possible for the customer to book your hotel. We talked about OTAs, and we talked about direct. This is an opportunity for hotels to really capture loyalty, really capture the customer direct. We know that the customers are very trepidatious about traveling, so they're likely going to be calling the hotel direct and asking more questions about their safety and what they're doing to ensure the safety of their guests. That's an opportunity to convert the booking direct there as well. Obviously, I'm not an operator, but you know, when it comes to marketing, making sure that you're giving the assurances that you're following every safety procedure possible to ensure that the guests can feel comfortable about booking. As far as cancel policies and so on, now is not the time to enforce advanced purchase rates or anything like that, but to be as flexible as possible with your cancel policy.
Tim, you were involved in the certification through HSMAI for revenue managers. Well, a couple of things. How do you manage revenue when there is no revenue to manage? And secondly, a lot of the people that are in that position that are trying to keep it together, they might not have dealt with another downturn, certainly not the one like this one. What are you telling your cohort as to what should they look out for?
Fake it until you make it, Abid. No, honestly, this is the opportunity for revenue management to shine. Communication is king during this downturn. Looking at as much data as possible and communicating that to all those concerned. Traditionally, in the hotel segment, there's been silos between sales, marketing, revenue management. If there's silos today, you're going to be that much less effective. You really need to work very closely with the sales folks, looking at every group opportunity, every BT opportunity out there, as well as be very tuned in with the marketing folks so that they're focusing on the appropriate customer base there. Finally, forecasting. And I know that the accuracy is not going to be great right now, but the more frequent that you forecast, the better you'll get at it over time, especially that short-term window. The operating departments really rely on you to have as accurate of forecast as possible. And the owners are obviously trying to get any indicator at all that that there will be a recovery and when that's going to happen. And if you're not sure about the longer term, put out different scenarios so that you can make decisions on 2 or 3 different scenarios as to what may happen over the time period, the summer and the fall, for example. And then we think that there's no opportunity from a pricing standpoint, but I tell you, there's opportunity out there. I was talking to one operator last week, and they had a hotel with a skeleton staff in Orange County, and last minute they opened up the beaches there. Their hotel got slammed. They filled 100%. They weren't expecting it, but again, that speaks to really keeping an eye on the trend short term, very, very quickly, and being able to, make those decisions on the fly there.
Well, Tim, and I'll turn it over to Sam in a second. First of all, there was a comment online about fake it until you make it. That's truly an entrepreneurial spirit. And the comment said that this whole pandemic has turned us more nimble in being able to adapt. But any thoughts on incremental fees? I know the industry is talking about, well, they have adopted destination fees and resort fees. And any thoughts on that? Do you think consumer likes it, dislikes it? And how would they be used in post-pandemic era? Are we going to put a Kleenex fee or Clorox fee, or what is next?
Yeah, that's such a controversial subject. And I think, like resort fees, there's been a lot of debate about that pre-pandemic. And the trend seemed to be that they were kind of going by the wayside a little bit. But, I looked at hotel availability in Las Vegas today, and at a major casino there, they're still charging a $51 per night resort fee. And what do I get with that? I'm not quite sure what I get, because I don't necessarily think I'm going to be going to the gym there. I would assume that the safety is first and foremost, regardless of whether there's a fee or not. But I think some of these fees, customers are going to look at very closely now, and they're going to question that even more. I think maybe in the short term, you could get away with some type of sanitation fee or safety fee or something like that. Customers understand that, and they want assurances, but you really need to back it up with them, and it needs to be very visible to them when they stay there that, if I paid an extra $25 for a safety fee or a sanitation fee, I want to know that that's actually happening, and it needs to be very visible when I'm there.
I think that $50 resort fee or whatever that is, you get a free room with it. That's essentially how it's going to work out these days. But let me turn it over to Sam.
Yes, I'm interested in the different demand generators that might help the hotels. Do you have any comment on that, on some best practices for different demand generators?
Yeah, I think Cindy spoke to it a little bit before. I was talking to an operator here in Raleigh the other day, and I was actually surprised at the levels of occupancy that they had. But then when we talked about it further, what was driving it was extended stay business. And I asked, is it, what type of extended stay business is it? Is it local people just needing a place to stay? There was some of that, but more of it was related to project work. So highway workers, construction, and other projects that didn't go away because they're deemed necessary, continue to the demand is still there for that. So that's an opportunity for other scale hotels as well. They can kind of refit their hotels a little bit to accommodate that customer. They can get a little bit better experience. and get that business as well. We talked about OTAs. As much as we don't like them in times like this, they've got a broad span as far as marketing is concerned. So there may be an opportunity there. You can work very closely with your market manager and have a very targeted approach for your property. The market manager knows best as to what demand is coming into the market and ensuring that you get your fair share of that just to build some occupancy over time. Then taking that customer, once you've captured that customer, and converting them to a direct customer from there. The other business, leisure will likely come back first. There's a lot of pent-up demand. Everybody wants to explore. Everybody wants to go on vacation, but they're probably not going to go overseas. They're not going to go to any island or anything like that. So really focused on those customers and what you can offer and what type of experience you can offer in the market that you're in will be very important.
Is it right to assume then, for instance, that the B leisure or business plus leisure type of category will also take some time before that will recover? I'm sorry, the business? Yeah, well, it's like a business plus leisure. The people go on business, but also combine it with some leisure stays. That will have a longer recovery period?
I think so. I would assume that if business travel is not happening, that component just isn't there.
Yeah.
Sam, if it's okay, we approaching the end of it. So if you don't mind, let's bring everybody together. And I'm going to ask this question of Rob. Rob, not to put you on the spot. One of the biggest guns that hoteliers have always used in their arsenal typically is dropping the rates. And we all think that generates demand. Can you share how you are fighting that battle? And at the end of the day, it is really a market-driven issue. But do you think that the rate drop is going to be a problem with this recovery?
I think that's a great question, and I think we're very, very much concerned about that with our colleagues. And we've seen rate drops in the past, and it's taken a long time to recover once rate has eroded. And the truth is, our costs are increasing; they're not decreasing, and so we will not be adjusting our rates down. We'll take a hit in occupancy before we do that. My hope is that my colleagues feel the same, and based on a lot of discussions that I've had, they seem to. Chasing rate down never wins. We never get where we want to be if we erode our rate. So that's our philosophy, but can't speak for everyone else.
Understandable, and people have to react to what the market does. And Cindy, you have the actual data. So do you have any indicators as to which way we are headed?
I think she's muted.
Cindy, I think you're muted.
Sorry about that. The rates right now are fairly flat. They dropped, and now they're not, I wouldn't say they're coming back, but we're not seeing huge dips. I mentioned that the two categories, loyalty member rate and OTA rates, have actually had a decent uptick. So, where the volumes are right now is rack bar, loyalty member rate, and OTA. So, I am hopeful, like everyone else, that everyone doesn't just drop their rate and think that the business is elastic enough to make a difference, because it won't. All you do is lose the rate. It doesn't really help much. So, we've bottomed out in the, kind of 50% range on 55% on rate. And now we're back up across the U.S. where, and again, everything negative against 2019 numbers. The last week of April, it was a 42.8%, which was, not as bad as it got at the worst. And it moved slightly down, just a couple tenths of a point, to 43.1, but it wasn't any big drop. And again, the loyalty member rate and the OTA seem to be growing at a pretty decent clip. And those rates are going up. They're improving. I wouldn't say going up. I mean, they're just improving, getting closer. So I am hopeful that there isn't this, rush to drop, and that in the areas of business that are growing, which is loyalty member rate or, discount off bar for those who aren't part of a big brand, plus the OTA rates, that everyone holds firm, because that's where the business is going to be coming for a while.
Well, that's definitely encouraging, because I know every time a market is experiencing a downturn, hoteliers typically think that they can generate the demand, and I'm one of those folks that might have deployed that, but inevitably it never ever works. So hopefully we have learned, or at least it appears that looking at the data, the industry definitely has learned. Tim, this is a question for you. What types of tools can we use to gauge success? What does success look like in this time period?
Well, this is definitely a new and interesting time period. So you really need to develop your own KPIs of success and what that looks like. Obviously, we have a new cost structure in place. So we need to take profitability into mind. So ensuring that if you're opening up a channel, that it's still profitable for you, and really measuring the kind of the GoPar aspect of it versus what Smith Travel says. You can have all the occupancy in the world, but if you're not getting the rate, how profitable is that business? Smith Travel is obviously still very important, just to understand the dynamics of the market. My suggestion would be to expand your comp set, or have a second comp set that you're looking at, because what's happening in your comp set may not be happening in your secondary comp set, and really understanding and get a bigger picture of what's happening out there. I think Cindy mentioned before, there may be, if you're a mid-scale operator and there's an upscale or upper upscale category hotel that you didn't traditionally have in your comp set, but you put it in your secondary comp set, they may be going after you and rate, didn't realize it. So it's important that you're also looking at that aspect of it.
One of our panelists had mentioned this. In many ways, the historical indices in this environment, I don't know how useful they are, other than I'm going to see that the market is dropping the rate and I'm going to drop the rate. But what might be more useful is the predictive indices. Cindy, back to you. You had highlighted Austin as a market that ran just below 50% occupancy. And as a matter of fact, there were other reports that market had done fairly well. I was pleasantly surprised that they had held that kind of occupancy. What's going on in that market?
Well, those numbers that you saw were through April. So we had January and February in there, which obviously will skew things because they were doing pretty well. So, if you isolate and you look at just March and just April, we're in the -70, -80 range in many markets. So I think, what we have a predictive model. So we take the historical, but we're actually predicting forward to be able to see what the expectation is. And because we're updating the data weekly, we'll be able to see what's coming in and what's actually growing. And I think, keeping really close tabs on that demand. And as Tim said, we don't believe in a comp set or secondary comp set, but actually, more broadly looking at the overall market and saying, where's the opportunity? And the opportunity for weekend business could be different than weekday. For leisure could be different than the local corporate. So you really have to think about who are you competing with in every one of those categories, weekend and weekday, and then set your sights on those hotels and be able to say, what is the rate activity? What's the demand level? How can I try to get my share, my optimal share of that business? Because I think that, the legacy approach of thinking that there's just one set of competitors, we're going to learn in this downturn, it's not going to work that way. There's going to be a lot of hotels that may have business that's a good fit for you that you might not have thought about before. And I think hotels have to be open-minded to that, and they have to be watching very closely to see what the patterns of demand in their market. So our predictive models will help kind of look forward and be able to see what could be expected given the patterns that we've seen.
Terrific.
Abid, if I may, for just 1 second, I have a good example of that. We have a hotel in Marco Island, Florida, where there's the largest JW Marriott on the planet just down the road from us. And traditionally, they have not been in our comp set because they're a convention hotel. There's no convention business coming to a brand new JW in Marco Island. And so all of a sudden, they're in our comp set, and they have a beautiful new beachfront property that they may be competing with our property that is more extended stay focused. So it's an interesting new world in that space.
Yeah.
Very true. Hey, Rob, if I may, while you have the camera, if I may ask you, what tools are you deploying to gauge success in what you're doing? And do you have any message for the owners and operators? And I promise I'll turn it over to Sam after this, but what would you say to your cohort of owners and operators as to what tools to use?
I think that our primary tool is full transparency, Abid, and it's not a direct answer to your question, but my advice to other owners, operators, and brands out there is that people need to know what we're doing and how we're doing it. I thought Tim's response was great earlier when he was talking about the person who is receiving the phone call needs to be able to be clear and transparent about what we're doing at our hotels to keep people safe. And so I think that shouting that message out loud and clear, we used to talk about all of the amenities we provided at our hotels, and we still do that. But now we have to talk about, like what you said earlier, is we clean our rooms. We use this type of fogger. We use this type of disinfectant. This is how many times we'll enter your room during your stay. And I think that, at least for the time being, every single hotel operator needs to be able to answer all of those safety questions clearly and visibly. So all of our websites now have a health and safety tab on them. And I was searching over the course of the last couple months for how people were disseminating COVID information. And I was amazed by how many hotel groups and individual hotels made no reference to it whatsoever. And I think that's just burying your head in the sand. And we're in a reality that mandates that we're clear and concise about what we're doing, and we do that publicly. So that's my advice and what we'll be doing.
I think as the travel opens up, sites like TripAdvisors are going to get tremendous volume because people are going to be very open to share as to whether they felt comfortable or not. So we do have to keep an eye on that. Over to you, Sam.
Well, I want to ask just a general question from all of you. Like, personally, what have you learned from this period that you can think back, saying, "Well, that was the experience that I wouldn't say changed my life, but was something very unique that will help me to live forward." Maybe Cindy, could you start with you?
Yeah, it was a big shock to the system. Obviously, shutting down an office, moving the whole team remote, getting into furloughs and layoffs, and applying for PPP loans to survive. I mean, these are things we certainly didn't expect to be busy with in the month of March this year.
Yeah.
Our business was stronger than ever and everything was going great. So I think you just can't look back. You only can look forward, and you have to look forward and know that the world has changed, and you just have to accept it and move on. And you have to operate with what the parameters are at that moment. And you cannot think beyond that. You just deal with the cards you got and you move on and you make the best of it. And I think that's, I think that attitude has probably been what has sustained me during a difficult time.
Very good. And how about you, Tim?
Yeah, I think Cindy's onto something there. We're in the new normal right now, and we're all trying to figure it out, obviously. But for me personally, it's been a time to kind of step back. I had a very busy schedule up until May or up until March. And then all this happened, and things changed significantly for, with my schedule, with my clients, and so on. But it also gave me a time to kind of step back, take a look at everything I was doing, my company's doing, and look at ways to partner with new partners, which I've done, and also just personally getting out more and stepping back from the work life and realize where you are. I've gotten to know my neighbor. I walk down the street, and neighbors that have been always too busy to talk before, now I know them. They're all out there. They're all searching. They're all wanting interactions. So it's been a great time of reflection for me.
Very good. And Rob, how about you?
That's great. I love hearing those thoughts from you guys. I think for me, this time has even further emphasized the importance of community in my life, in our life as a hotel company and as a piece of a community. We've taken the opportunity to refresh our passion for what we do and think about how we need to constantly be reimagining and thinking about what the questions we should be answering are. And to make reference to our common friend Bashar again, sometimes we have to stop and ask the larger questions rather than the types of things about what hotel amenity should we use or what tile should we use in this bathroom. But we need to recenter ourselves and get back to the core of what we do, which is caring for people and hosting them and making them part of our communities. And when you have time separate from those communities that are so important, it is, at least for me, it's caused me to reflect on the value of all of the people that are in my life, from the time that I've spent homeschooling my daughters to changing the diapers on my newborn son in the middle of conference calls. And you're welcome for not seeing that on this one, but it's been a good time, surprisingly, because of the reconnection with a lot of folks and simpler things that got interrupted by all the travel and all the business and that kind of stuff.
Yeah, very good. Great answer. Thank you. Abid.
Rob, it's funny that you say that. One of our panelists had said that it had been a very, very long time since he consistently had family dinners. And he's able to do that, though the dinner conversations might be contentious, but yet they're able to have the dinner together. So lots to be thankful for, lots to look forward to better times. I think we have gone over our allotted time, and it's because of this very engaging conversation. I really appreciate Cindy, you taking the time and being with us. Tim and Rob, thank you so much. Sorry we went over, but the conversation was so good. It's kind of tough to just hold strictly to the schedule. Thanks to all of our viewers for joining us on Facebook, on YouTube, and of course on LinkedIn. We really appreciate your engagement and your participation, and we will continue to bring you other topics that are more relevant to our industry as we evolve and as we come out of this pandemic. Thanks for joining us. Over to you, Sam, for closing.
Thank you, Abid. I also like to thank all the live viewers, all the replay viewers who joined us on YouTube. So if you liked the content and and discussions we have had here on this channel, just press the subscribe button, and then you want to be notified. Just you see that bell on the right side. Just press that bell also, and you will be notified when we go live. And also a big thanks to the LinkedIn viewers who has been active today. Also, that if this is the first time you're watching our hospitality talks, just by following my profile, Sam-Erik Ruttmann, you also will be notified when we go live. And finally, a great thank you to the most active group has been from the Facebook Hospitality Talks Facebook group that has been very helpful and bring up some very interesting comments. I just want to recognize we had some who has been here. Unfortunately, from Facebook, I don't see the name, but from YouTube, we have Eva Mossberg and Sylvain Sirard who's joining, who said thank you for the great conversation and input that everybody has been given. And Abid, I think we have some episodes coming up next week. Are we allowed to reveal what kind of topics we're going to have next week?
By all means, have at it.
Well, I think we have some stellar hotel general managers who's going to be put to test to explain how they manage the situation and moving forward. So we have next week we have 2 sessions on the 27th and on the 29th, and the hotel general managers are from around the world. So it will be interesting to see their perspective of how they have managed this very challenging times since people from the generation, both Abid and I am on, we really cannot provide advice since we have never had this experience. So we are learning from these sessions for sure. So but from that point, we'll just thank you again, and we'll see you next week.